Valentine Day birdies, welcome to my channel. My name is Jersey. Today I'm going to give you a pattern and show you how you can make Valentine's birds or just heart pillow for different ways to decorate with. Follow along. And today we are going to make little love birdies. They can be used as bowl fillers if you want to make several of them. We can put a loop on it and hang them from the shelf. We can put a dowel up through the bottom. You can put a dowel up through the bottom just so it reaches a little bit in there, and then you can put them into jars, vases. There's many ways. I'm basically going to show you how to make the little love birdie in different ways of how to come about making them. To begin with, download the 2 pages, the PDF free pattern. There is more in-depth detail on the blog. This is basically just showing you how, if you're very experienced, you can just read through this, but the blog will give you more information detailed. So the very first thing you want to do, you want to cut one template that you'll use over and over. You can use a cereal box. This is freezer paper. My favorite is stencil plastic. If you use freezer paper, just put it on there, draw your heart. Then, if you're using freezer paper, you would cut out at least what's inside of the square, if not more. It doesn't have to be exact. Right sides together. This happens to be an old shirt of mine. Once you have your heart drawn on freezer paper, go ahead and cut it out. You can iron that on. Take a water-soluble marker, a light-colored pencil, whatever you can see. Draw your heart. Remove your freezer paper. Then you have to decide before you start sewing. Are you going to do a slit so you can turn it inside out and then either whip stitch it or put a heart over it? Or some people like to sew all the way and leave this open and then they hand stitch. I don't like that because it gives it a bumpy. It's very hard to get the edges perfect, where here it's all sewn and turned under. Whatever your preference is. I always make a slit and then I turn it inside out. Now, why I like template plastic, if I wanted to fussy cut and have every single one of my birds the same with this pattern, then I would just take a marker and basically go over certain spots. Then when I had my fabric again, I would line up the lines on there exactly where it was if that was a heart. That's how you do fussy cut, over and over and over if you want to use the same pattern. You will need to eyeball and mark on your plastic or mark on your freezer paper. Use your pattern as a reference. Birdie number 1 has a lot smaller comb than birdie number 2. If you want to make them all the same, then you could just use either or. But basically eyeball where the comb will start and end, and then you'll place your beaks. These will be where your beaks will fit. So this is beak and this is where your comb is. And then this is the eye. You can make a slit if you want to have the heart the same spot every time. What I did, I took the pattern, traced it out of either freezer paper or template plastic. I put a slit in it. So every time if I want the wing to be in the same spot, I will do that on every bird that I make. Or if you want your heart down here, this is basically how as wide as you can go in your slit, and that will have to be enough to turn it inside out once we sew all the way around. But it's sewing in 2 steps. Cut out all your pattern pieces. There's the heart. There are 2 ways you can do the comb and beak. You can cut them out exactly to match the pattern. Same thing with the beak. This is wool. You'll need wool or felt, 1 piece. This way it won't fray. You can either draw this and cut it out exactly, or you can have a rectangle about the size that it's going to be, and when you turn it inside out, you can hand cut the comb and beak after they've been sewn. I prefer it this way because it gives it a different look every single time. And same thing with the beak. I just go back and I cut it. But let me show you how to do it. So once you have all your pattern pieces and you have your heart drawn right sides together, here's my slit. I don't know if you can see it. You cut your slit before you start sewing, only on one piece. You don't cut slits on both sides. So once you trace this out, if it's folded like mine is, mine's one piece folded, so now it becomes two, I just open it up and I cut a slit. You can cut it after you get done sewing, that's your preference. I like to do it first so I don't forget. Now if you look at the directions, here's point 1 at the top of the comb. You're going to sew this way, roughly down to the point there. And this is where we are right now. So I started about where the comb will go, and I sewed all the way down. This is where we are right now. This is what it will look like. Then you will take your comb, either one, number 1 or number 2, and your beak, and looking at the picture, if you didn't mark it, you're going to eyeball it. You always start with the comb, because then that will tell you how far down the beak has to be. If you start with the beak, sometimes the comb would be right next to it and it'll look funny. You have to start with the comb first and then your beak. As you can see, I made little tick marks right here. This is about where the comb will be. This is about where the beak would be. Take your comb, lift it up. Now you're putting, this is what it's going to look like inside. You're putting most of it inside and you're leaving a little bit, at least a 1/4 inch past this line, because when you turn it inside out, most of it will be, now the big part will be on the outside once you turn it inside out. This is what it's going to look like when I put it inside right now. And you'll just push it right toward the last part, actually the very first thread that you sewn in backstitch. Put it in there, flatten it out, and then your beak, it's okay if it's touching, because when you start your beak, you're going to be cutting this much off. Most of your beak is going to be inside again, just like this. Now I'm going to go back to my sewing machine, and I'm going to continue all the way around, and I'm going to backspace, backspace. So as a refresher, which I didn't show you, I started up here, and I sewed all the way around and I backstitched. Then I put the beak and the comb inside, just a little bit showing past that line, because we're going to be cutting it. You want to make sure you get that encased. Now I'm going to sew from point 2 back to point 1. You need an open toe foot for this. And the reason I do not cut the heart out and do a 1/4 inch, there's no room to manipulate and hold the heart. This way it's so much easier doing it like this. And I have a pretty small stitch. And then I'm going to back stitch. And it doesn't matter if you're not exactly on the line. Let me just peek one more time, make sure everything is in there. Measure twice, cut once. I don't pin, you don't need to, but that's your preference if you want to. You may have to pull it because it's going over thick wool. Go slow. You can loosen your feed dogs if you want. This is a very old machine. The feed dogs are not very tight. I can twirl it. If not, do a few stitches, pick up your foot, put it back down, do a few stitches, pick your foot up, and just start turning the fabric as you go. I'm back to where I started. Go over a few stitches, back stitch. Now I'm going to go back to the table and cut about a 1/4 inch away all the way around. And then we're going to turn it inside out through the slit. Let's go back to the table. Now we are back at the table. Need a really good pair of scissors. This is where my gingers come in handy. And go in toward a little bit. toward the center. You could make little snip to help ease it. I've never had a problem, so I do not do that. As you can hear, it's a windy day on the mountain. I donate these scraps to the local dog shelter. They make beds out of them. I have several of these donate buckets all over my sewing and weaving room. This was from a rug that I made on my loom. This is leftover waste. So donate to your local dog shelter. They make beds for the dogs in the shelters. So not to bore you, I'm basically going to just show you roughly how to do this. Now you can also go in here if you want to cut some of the bulk out a little bit more, because it will be bulky when you turn it. So we're good on that. I love my giant hemostats. You don't need ones this big, but I use them a lot when I make my primitive dolls. So you would put it in, you pinch the top part, just say, pinch it. You can even lock it. And go slow, you don't want to rip your slit any bigger. And once you get some of that in there, you just start pulling it out. Pull it out, pull it out. I have one already done at this step. I'm going to show you. So here it is. I just finished turning this in and out. And again, I went in and I cut my own beak. I find that if I take the pattern and I get it too far in or too far out, you might only have a little bit showing. If you do a rectangle, then you can cut what you need to. I find it easier with little pieces to start with a big bold piece and then cut it down, and that's what I did here. I actually like that. It looks very primitive. I'm going to stuff this. I personally do not use polyfill or anything that's not organic. I buy my cotton off of Amazon. This is raw cotton. It's mostly cleaned. It doesn't have a smell, but this is raw cotton. I used to use alpaca and wool, but then the bugs would get in it, and I had to throw away many primitive dolls that broke my heart that the bugs came in. A little bit of this will last a long, long way. It's all natural, and if anything ever happened to it, it's biodegradable. It's not going to hurt the earth. I'll leave the link to where I get my cotton. A little bit, I have purchased my cotton probably 2 years ago, and I'm still on the same bag. I'll briefly just show you. I use the hemostats again. I grab a little bit at a time, put it down into the hole. Only grab a little bit at a time, because if you get too much, it'll be very bulky. Again, I'm going to fast forward to this. This one's completed. This is wool, as you can see here. It was a blazer. I recycled it, repurposed it, and felted it. So this is the wool I've been using. Wool will not fray. Same with felt. I don't like felt because it's not natural, but I like wool. You put this on, but before you put it on, you could do your initials, you could do a date. If you were going to do that, you would have a big piece of wool. You could put it into a hoop, and then you could do initials, date, whatever you want. Then you would cut the heart out. So if I was going to do this, I would draw basically where my heart's going to be. I would cut a big piece out. Leave the big piece to either hand embroider or put it on a hoop. Once it was done, because I would have the heart drawn, I know to embroider inside of the heart, then I would cut it out. Once your heart is cut out, put it over the slit. You might do a slit in the back. If you choose to do the slit in the front, wherever you want, you could make it look like a wing. Wherever you decide to put the slit. So for this one, all I did was did a buttonhole stitch all the way around. I couldn't find my glass beads, so I did a French knot. I put the long needle in, did a French knot, pulled it back out, did a French knot, knotted it, and just pulled it up through and then clipped it. You can make plenty of these for both bowl fillers to put into bowls like primitive. You can age it. I have the aging stain ingredients at the blog. Also, you can do this whole process if you'd like. You can take a seam ripper, rip out a few of the seams, just enough to put a dowel through there, a little dowel. So that's what that would look like. Then you can put these into bowls, make them stand up, longer dowels. You can stain this, paint this, put a ribbon on it. You can leave a little of this open right here and put a real tiny sprig of lavender. You can hang a key. You can put your, sew a key on and then put your heart over it so it covers the loop of the key. I did not do this yet, but if you want to, you can take a wire, poke it through down there, weed it back up through, and then knot it on top, and that could be a hanger. There's so many things you can make with this. I have rusty pins that I made myself. You could pin that on with the key hanging from it. You can have little rusty bells, sew them on. You could even use a rusty bell for an eye. That would look really cute. You'd only need one, so you would put it through there, sew it there, turn it around, and knot it on the back. But let your imagination go wild. This is just to start you on creating the birdies. Then you can go from there, what you want to add. If you want to make a larger bird, when you print this, hit 125. If you want to make a smaller bird, reduce it down to 80%. Play around with it. Do the whole page. You can use a loop of your choice. Like I just said, you can put a jute piece of jute in there, weed it through, knot it on top. Be creative. I did not have time to show every single one of the steps. The basic was to get you a basic bird. That's it. And from there, you can create what you want. What is also special is if you have your mother or grandmother, you have some of their clothing, to make it out of their clothing. Here's a man's shirt. You can make it out of there. So if you did make it out of mom's shirt, you could write mom and today's date, or dad, or your initials or their initials, and hand all these that were made from a shirt out to your loved ones in the family. If you took your mother's apron, her shirt. What I like to also do, you can take old doilies from your mother or grandmother or someone and draw, make sure you do enough there, and then draw your heart and sew on it. That's beautiful, especially if one of these is ratty and only half of it's good. You can cut this out of the front, and then here where it's plain, cut the back out. You only need to see the front, and then you would do the same thing on this end. Instead of using this for the front and the back, you'd be able to get a lot more out of them. But you have to leave enough room for the square, at least that big, and then your heart would go there. And then maybe you could do a ribbon out of this or something. You can take this lace off and do it at the top, or you can even, if you wanted to, put that all the way around like rickrack. That would look really cute. But that's it. I just wanted to get you started, and drop a comment below or share a picture. I'd love to share it out on social media if you send me a picture. Woohoo, we did it. Pat yourself on the back. Thank you for stopping by. Sorry it was so long. Please share on social media, give a thumbs up, please subscribe, and thank you so much for coming back.